Star Trek Starfleet Academy, Episode 7, Cosine, is an episode filled with betrayal and with worms that can go warp. And a lot of weird shit, but also a lot of good shit. Let's take a look at the episode. Welcome to this episode of Starfleet Academy, Cosine. This is an interesting episode. Once again, for this video, and next video we'll be back to normal. I'm going to talk about things I liked about this episode. Now, we get the summer vacation of Starfleet Academy, so all the students are getting sent home or to families to stay with. Caleb decides to stay. He argues with RK, and RK sort of doesn't understand, and then we get why he's angry, because she didn't ask Noose Braka about her mother when they were battling in the last episode, which is a while ago. There's a bit of time passed in this episode. We get to see all of the crew. Sam is still glitching from getting hurt in the last episode, so she's going to a hologram resort. Genesis is meant to be going somewhere. Then she gets offered to go into the pre-command course, which is basically an accelerated track to command, I'm gathering, which she looks a bit worried about when RK is telling her. So we'll see what happens with that later on. There's a lot of things in this episode that are interesting. It's a much slower episode. It's more about a little bit of aftermath, a little bit about learning from your flaws. There's a lot of character building in this episode. Now, RK is going on holiday as well. She's packing her bags. Caleb gets to stay because he nags like a little bitch. And so he's there alone with Jet Reno. Darem, of course, is walking down a corridor, and all of a sudden he's kidnapped by some people. Jaden sees it. He's meant to be going to Ibiza with Kyle, forced to wear a Hawaiian shirt. And he sees Darem get stolen through a portal and just runs after him, apologizing to Kyle on his way through. When he gets to the planet, he hears some yelling and scrubbing. He goes to the tent. The planet looks really nice, by the way. And he sees that Darem has got like a wreath on his head, and there's two people there giving him a drink, and maybe things aren't what they seem. He runs in with a rock. So this is a sunset moon, so it's like a marriage moon. It's a big rocky planet, and obviously using the AR wall. And they don't use the AR wall too much in Starfleet Academy, but I've noticed that when they do, it's a little, I don't know how to put it. They design the sets, I don't know whether they design the sets or they just do have a round quality about them, and it really sort of makes everything look a bit too artistic. And there's always a cliff to separate the AR wall and the background wall, because I'm sensing that maybe they don't line up completely, so it's just easier to have that separation. But we find out that Darem is getting married. He's going for a wedding, and he lies to his people and says that Jaden is Cosine, which is his best man, which is an interesting thing, seeing his, not his home world, but a home world adjacent. Darem is an interesting character in himself. He's gone from being sort of a douchebag, sort of a lovable douchebag. Jaden being there is sort of apt because there's been like a little bit of a connection. I think it was the last episode before where they had it was a few episodes ago where they had a moment when they were doing the, which people don't seem to think was an attraction thing, but I got an attraction thing. Caleb is sunbathing. He's living it up by himself in Starfleet Academy. And Genesis is somehow there. She hacked her way back because she didn't want to go. She sees Caleb shirtless, lying, sunbathing. It's a lot. And then they sort of challenge each other to games, which is really interesting. The crux of this episode, we go through it. So I'll go talk about Genesis and Caleb. Throughout the episode, Genesis and Caleb are talking about Tarima and how Caleb felt a lot of fear around contacting Tarima and what happens when he was there, culminating in him telling Genesis that he was scared because she saw something that he didn't want her to see. There is a moment between Caleb and Genesis in this where they sort of look at each other. There's a little bit of attraction there, but they don't do anything, which is good, because we don't need love triangles. Yeah, we don't need it. Like they have a lot of chemistry together, and he does with Tarima as well. I'd say he does more with Genesis, to be honest. But the whole, I just don't want to deal with that. I want them to sort of be honourable characters, and that sort of thing isn't right. So there's sort of this edging. We also learn about Genesis's feelings of that she hasn't earned her place in Starfleet because her father's a captain, and so people expect her to be a captain because she's the same as her father. So is everything earned, or is it just what she's expected to do? A lot of expectations around it. She doesn't. She wants to know that she's meant to be there. So there's a lot of insecurities around these two. There's a funny moment where they're playing toxic or non-toxic with aliens. There's a warp speed bug that jumps from wall to wall. Jet and Reno coming in, fixing her toe, and they secretly freeze some goo that was about to drop on Reno. Like there's some funny little moments. But Genesis and Caleb's whole thing culminates in Genesis going, "Let's break onto the bridge." They do this, and then we find out that Genesis wants access to a key, of which will allow her to access her own files so she can edit her own references. Caleb sort of was aware that something was going on, but he put it out of his mind because they were having so much fun. And we finally get to the crux of the episode, which I'll talk about in a second. Let's go back to Jaden and Darem. So Darem was betrothed to a woman, to Kira, early in his life, and his whole thing was he was going to be in Starfleet for 5 or 6 years. Then he was going to come back and assume his place as a part of the ruling family, or king or queen. He was going to marry her, but Kyra's parents abdicated early, so now they have to get married early. And he was sort of unexpected, and he didn't expect it. But he's going along with what she's saying. He's like, she goes, "Look, if you need to think about it," it's like, "No, I love you. This is what we were meant to do." And he sort of goes along with it. And that's what he does throughout this episode. He sort of goes along with it, He does have a worrying look in his face. Now, Jaden and him's relationship with this is Jaden is talking about how he's leaving Starfleet and he thought he liked it, and he talks about the help that he's given him and the kind of sort of brave douchebag he is, or brave asshole. And it's an interesting sort of dynamic between them two, because they're the ones who probably form the biggest bond out of Darem and anyone. So as the episode progresses, we sort of dealt with this thing that Darem's going through with it because he feels it's his duty and it's in service. And Jaden's sort of going, "Well, no, you have a duty to yourself to be happy, and you have a duty to yourself to be you." There's a few more little romantic tension moments, like when Jaden's feeling cold because he's wearing a wedding outfit made out of liquid coral, or like wet coral, and Darem gives him his coat. And they sort of talk, like Jaden's sort of going, "No, you can't do this if you're not sure. It's not fair to anyone and not fair to you." And Darem sort of snaps back at him, and there's a risk that Jaden's going to leave, but he doesn't. The wedding ceremony goes through. Jaden gives a speech talking about how Darem's changed, and how even though he's a bit of a douchebag, like he's saved their lives, he's put others before himself. He always thinks about himself. And while we're watching Jaden give his speech, Kyra's watching, and she's sort of, you can see in her face, she's recognizing something. And finally, sort of at the end, after the wedding, Kyra turns to Darem and goes, "Look, you need to abdicate, because that person that Jaden was talking about is not the person I know. You were quiet and always did your duty." And she talks about how he was so happy to go to Starfleet Academy so he could be himself and be who he was meant to be. So there's that sort of affirming. So they don't end up getting married. Darem ends up going back. Jaden and him sort of have a nice little speech at the end where he sort of says he's a lovable asshole in a way. Then Kyle turns up. Darem does not like Kyle. It's very clear. I don't know whether it's jealousy or what it is. I don't stop it with the three-way thing. I suppose it adds romantic tension. So on to Genesis and Caleb. So Genesis and Caleb are on the bridge. She gets her key, and when Caleb realizes that she's been manipulating him to get what she wanted, Jet Reno comes in, catches them, and then they're in trouble from Captain Arcade, who's come back from her holiday and is not happy. Genesis admits that she stole it. She wants to see the references to see whether she genuinely earned it. Apparently she did a few things wrong, and they said a few things like that she was just playing along to be like her dad. She didn't really know who she was. Like things that she thought discriminated her from the pre-command program. Now, Arcade talks about how, no, you have a natural talent. You're a natural leader. You make good decisions. And except for this one, of course. And Caleb goes in to protect her at first as well. And Caleb's really softened as the season's gone on. He's not quite so bang, 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 bang. He's sort of softening. And Genesis is sort of, she's ambitious and she wants things. And you sort of understand from her perspective that she's sort of living up to her own expectations of herself and her father. So there's a lot. So Genesis, obviously the stories parallel a lot in that Genesis is trying to live up to what everyone expects her to be while trying to find herself. Darem's the same thing. He's trying to live up to whatever expects him to be, but he just wants to be himself. Caleb and Jaden are more the, I want to say, the grounded center of like, look, you need to be yourself. That's the number one most important thing. And Ake talks about this, and she talks about how she doesn't kick them out, which, to be honest, Caleb has got away with a lot of shit. He would be kicked out by now, I kind of feel. And Genesis, this is her first thing. I'm sure they'll be fine. I think my one big question is how fucking easy is everything to hack in Starfleet Academy? Every second episode, they're hacking into something, they're taking control of something. They're either superb hackers or the ship just has the worst fucking security. And if that's the case, they should be taking Caleb and Genesis to the fucking IT department at Starfleet HQ and getting them to work on the security, because it seems wacky how often they hack into things. Now, the final thoughts on this episode is that it is an episode about building the relationships with people. Genesis and Caleb and Jaden and Darem. Jaden and Darem have already had a similar episode. Genesis and Caleb have had similar moments, but not a full episode. And talking about the flaws of people and how you use them to grow. And Ake brings it home at the end. A lot of the time with Starfleet Academy, I notice they sort of bring it home at the end. And this episode is about growth and change and sort of doing what is right for you, not doing what is right for others. And they talk about service and duty and that dedication. There's also reinforcing that they want to be in Starfleet and they love Starfleet, which I really like, because I think that you can sort of get bogged down in the other stories and not realize that these people actually want to be a part of Starfleet and they believe in Starfleet's mission. And it's a fun, emotional episode that it's not high stakes, which is what people complain about, but it certainly is a big character growth episode. It's an episode dealing with 4 of our central cast. Sam's obviously relegated, and I'm sure we'll get an episode with her at some point. And we're dealing with sort of them growing up. And this is the thing. Starfleet Academy isn't about our grown Starfleet officers. It's about how those officers grew and changed through Starfleet Academy to become the officers we know. And this is one of those episodes that really emphasizes that. I'd say it's not my favorite episode of the season. I do like the Jade and Darem thing. I did a meme about it. And I genuinely enjoy their relationship. I think Genesis, as I said, Genesis and Caleb have more charisma together than I think Caleb and Tarima. But I think Caleb and Tarima's relationship is much more built on honesty and openness. The episode closes on Caleb writing his letter, and he talks about how maybe it wasn't her fault that he saw the memory in the previous episode, that she saw the memory in the previous episode, but maybe it was his fault because he wanted to show her and open up to her because she's so important to him. And I love this because Caleb's story is about opening up and connecting with the universe again, which is kind of Starfleet's story at the time. They're coming out of the burn, they're growing. It's all of these people's journeys. And the people who are arguing Starfleet Academy isn't Star Trek really aren't watching the whole message of Star Trek, because a lot of these stories are built around everything in the Star Trek world, as well as the characters, the family, and the communication. The reason the TNG cast connected is because each one of those characters connected to each other on a personal level. Sure, there's space anomalies and action, and this might have a bit more drama and stuff like that than before, but they are growing characters at a different time, trying to make the best of everything. And to be honest, I think this is a good episode. I've not seen an episode of this series yet that I outright, this is fucking terrible, but this is a good one. This is a median one. This is 5 or 6 out of 10. The last episode was like 6 or 7 out of 10. Yeah, I really want to know your thoughts. Write it down in the comments. If you don't like Starfleet Academy, give me a better reason than woke or nonsense. Have a great day. I will see you next week.
you.